Cool. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar on why most construction tech fails and how to choose what actually delivers ROI. My name is Raphael Scheps. I'm the CEO at Converge, and I'm joined today by Marco Bonelli, partner and VP of Client Innovation at SEKTOR.Build, who's driving ConTech adoption across the industry, and who's also previously led digital transformation at Vinci in the UK. Before we get started today, let's go over some quick housekeeping items. You'll be muted for the webinar so you can hear the speakers clearly. If you have any trouble hearing us, please message us in the chat and our team will troubleshoot for you or with you. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the Q&A tab and we'll try to answer those at the end or we'll follow up privately. If you miss anything, don't worry, there will be a video on demand version of this shared with you at the end by email. And lastly, we've pinned a very short 15-second questionnaire in the chat. We'd be very grateful if you could answer that at the end before signing off. Cool, so let's kick off. So for those of you who don't know Converge, we're a construction tech startup that digitizes concrete. Our solution set includes sensors that are used for digital maturity monitoring in the concrete space, as well as software solutions like Data Hub that help people manage concrete on job sites. We're really driving the efficiency and decarbonization of the material based in London, UK. And I'm Raphael Scheps, the co-founder CEO. Marco, it'd be great if you could really kick off by introducing yourself and telling us a bit more about SEKTOR.Build.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here with you. So, good morning, everyone. So, I'm Marco Bonelli. I have an engineering background. Previously worked at Vinci Construction, where I led the digital and innovation team across the UK. And currently, I lead the client innovation department here at SEKTOR.Build. So, we are a technology adoption platform, and we help measure clients all across EMEA, maximizing the ROI of their tech investment. As part of my role, I'm responsible for helping our clients upgrading their processes and by bringing together people, process, and technology.
Amazing. Thanks, Marco. And we're excited to have you on here today. I thought I'd start by just talking about why this topic. We're surrounded by construction tech. A couple of stats on that. I think we've seen a cumulative total of about $37 billion invested into construction tech since 2014. So there's been a huge shift in just the amount and volume of new technologies. Actually, over $1 billion in venture investment just in Q1, and an ecosystem of several thousand construction tech startups around the world. So the volume of solutions has just exploded, which is amazing, right? We've got all these new digital solutions. But ultimately, I think one of the things that's still quite elusive is how do you drive real ROI, right? How do you actually get return on investment when you're adopting technologies in the sector? And so I thought we'd just start with really, Marco, your insight as you worked across large organizations such as Vinci and others, but also with your clients at SEKTOR.Build. What do you see when tech adoption goes right in construction, and where does it typically go wrong?
Thanks, Raf. I really love your quote. Say we are surrounded by ConTech, but ROI is elusive. Something that we always hear. And as I previously, I was a buyer of technology when I was working at Vinci, and now as a trusted advisor with our clients, we always hear, or if you buy this technology, the ROI you will get is 10x, 15x, but the real issue sometimes is how to really materialize these ROIs. So in terms of request, it's a great question, and it is a mixed picture. We cannot have one single answer on what goes well and what goes wrong, but we can see patterns. In general, we can see that tech adoption goes well when technology is clearly tied to a business object. So it can be either improve efficiency, reducing cost. And then there is the process and the workflow review before applying technology. Technology is not applied blindly. I love telling my clients where if you do something that is not correct and then you buy technology, you are still not doing the same action, not correct, but now you're doing 10 times faster. So one of the key parts is make sure that the technology is not applied blindly without reviewing the process. And then have a full plan support with proper onboarding and adoption behind. Where instead we can see it goes wrong, and we can see this pattern, is where the tech adoption of purchasing technology is treated like an IT project rather than a full change management process that has to be followed step by step. or when technology is pushed top down by the leadership team, with very little engagement with the site teams or full understanding by the site teams of why they have to embrace a new technology, why this technology has been brought on site, and how this technology can really change their day-to-day life, making them more efficient, save time, and reducing their tasks. It's a very busy site team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting because construction in some respects is so federated in that you've got the job
Yeah.
site and the HQ that it just complicates adoption. And we've seen it certainly at Converge, right? Rollout across an organization is really hard to drive successfully. Um, and so I guess we could look at this as the ConTech iceberg, right? That's what we've kind of started calling it. You've
Yeah.
got the tip of the iceberg, which is, hey, let's adopt and use this piece of technology. Then you've got all the stuff that's hidden beneath the surface, the stuff that most teams don't plan for. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about that? I mean, what is beneath the iceberg, and how do you get construction teams to actually be successful?
First, I always say that choosing technology and doing the initial POC is just 10% of the journey, while the remaining 90% is making sure that adoption goes right. So that means training, leadership alignment. And as you say, we can use the figure of the iceberg. This 10% is the part that is visible. You purchase the technology and you try to make it work. But what there is behind is a lot of tasks that has to be streamlined in a proper way, starting from a pilot strategy and planning. So I have an understanding of all the process that currently will be involved with the use of new technology. To then design, test, and optimize workflow to make sure that this technology can be built and used within the standard process within the company. And then have a proper communication plan with all the stakeholders to ensure that this new technology that will be brought on site is going to be fully understood and shared across all the different levels of the organization. And then what is real the key part is making sure that there's a proper training plan. There's not just a one-off video or some documentation, but a proper plan of adoption and training with all the different teams, including, for example, weekly or monthly monitoring to understand how adoption is performing, to be able to understand all the full KPI. And at the end, have a full continuous support to make sure that when there are any technical support, any troubleshooting, we can intervene on, everyone can intervene in immediate value to be able to don't lose time. So all of this task is just what is beneath the surface on adoption. And as you can see, just choosing a technology is just, I would say, the funny, the nice part, the easiest part. And then once it has been purchased, we have to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we're talking, step number one, choosing a technology. I think you said something
Yeah.
really important, which is the business goal really matters. What are you actually trying to achieve? But then actually, as we get to, I guess the bottom of the iceberg, it's how do you implement, how do you onboard, how do you get people using the tech? Marco, I'm just wondering, do you have an example you could talk us through that worked particularly well, either at Sector or at Vinci, where you saw that actually drive the impact you were looking for?
Yeah, of course. So especially working here at Sector, we work with a major consultancy across EMEA, in this case on the Middle East. We work with a client where a 360 reality capture technology got purchased. And as part of this process, we work with the quality, health and safety, and cost team to be able to upgrade their process, understand how this technology could have been brought within the daily usage and updating their workflow. So what we started to do to make sure that there was a full adoption, as you said, just technology got purchased with the initial part, is understanding which were the objectives, how to update the process. So we did a mapping on the current process, the current workflow, and then we redesigned them based on the use of new technologies. We created an adoption plan with different steps, identifying champions to be able to empower them and not just training team, creating digital guidance, and also using some gamification exercise to be able to make people curious. And as well, when you bring something new as a human being, there is always the fear of a change. So why do we have to learn new technology? Why do I have to change what I'm doing? I've done the same jobs for the last 30 years. Why do I need to change now? I'm sure all of us that work in technology and construction always heard the same thing. So what we try to do is try to move this fear of a change in request for a change, showing the benefit of why this technology will benefit them. So not just something that's been imposed from the top down. And the example that we're currently doing this Giga project is working with the site team. Was a 300 plus site team because it was a very large project in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and working with them and showing them the benefit. Working with them on site, showing if you currently do your current job, you will take X amount of time. But if you follow this new updated approach with the technology, you will shorten your activities by 30-40%. Also considering the heat wave, the very high temperature, they don't have to work 2 p.m. around the site. They could have been in the side cabin reviewing the data they captured. So that showed them that these activities were benefiting them rather than being something that has been imposed from the HQ. Someone one morning decided to purchase the technology and bring them on site.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're ultimately saying is, as much as a technology play, this is a people industry, and we ultimately need to kind of get the people on board, which I think brings us really nicely actually
100%.
to the topic of like the job site versus HQ, because I think you talked us through how you got 300 plus folks on the job site to actually start adopting technology. How do you manage this dynamic between what people on job sites want versus what the HQ wants from a reporting perspective?
That is a very great question. And before working HQ, I could have possibly fall in this trap. As people work in HQ, that they're not always on site and not always have project visibility. They always want to be updated. They want to know exactly what's happening on each project. And if there are any problem, they have to pick up to be able to be fixed. While you are on site, you just are delivering the job. So these reporting activities sometimes can be a burden to the site teams. It's something that is needed as HQ to be able to run the organization, but something that the site activities doesn't is not seen as something useful. It's seen as a burden, as an extra task that has to be delivered by them in a very busy schedule. One of the key factor I see here, I would say, is data interoperability. So try to use technology that enable the team to be more efficient. So be able to tie with the business objective, but then be able to capture the data and process it so that this one can be useful at HQ level without adding extra task on the site team. So that is where I see this problem between what the site team needs and what HQ needs can be fixed. Is making sure that this data can be passed from the site to HQ, but also when we drive technology, always we believe that technology has to be HQ led. So it's us having a holistic view across the company. That technology has to be led by HQ and led by value, led by example, showing how technology can be used across the different processes that got upgraded. But then, yes, it's a big problem that we find across different organizations, where sometimes there is a need of data to be transferred and being viewed at HQ level that is not normally seen as a value at site level. So there can be a task that not normally get done just because there is no time.
Yeah, and I guess if you tie this back into sort of your earlier point around onboarding and training plans, I mean, how do you manage that? Because there's dozens of job sites or sometimes hundreds of job sites with tens of thousands of people, and you've probably got a small team at HQ that wants to drive innovation. Do you train every single job site in person? Yeah, what are the mechanics to kind of make this scalable?
Definitely, the adoption part is a key fundamental. So just making a video and some manuals will never gonna enable technology to stick and be able to be understood. So by my experience before Vinci and now at Sector, what we try to do is a very high touch effort with our clients. So making sure that each single person is trained and work at two different levels, identifying champions that can drive the technology and the adoption across the project, but also tying the success of the technology with their success. They can be recognized and rewarded in their job. And also this one led what we can call black belt. So it's the one that drive within each project and the champion of each project, but also continue to train and every single user across the project. We believe that this is a key factor to enable adoption and to then be able to enable ROI, to be able to use the technology to tie with the business objective. So yes, making a very low touch training with a video, a few FAQ, and manual will never make the technology to be used, and therefore will never be able to deliver the ROI they got promised.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is actually you've got to build that network of champions across multiple job sites to galvanize the company into change. Because you're really
Yes.
using influence, right? It's not authority. You can't mandate these technologies, can you?
No, I've seen certain times where company try to mandate technology. So we can have the bottom-up approach or the top-down approach. So we can have the carrot or the stick. Sometimes company try to use the stick, but is as a human, you always try to not follow the structure. Something is mandated to you without fully understanding the benefit of why you have to do it. So always trying to work with the user and be able to have a people-first approach is one of the key characteristics to make sure that the technology can get used. And the most successful onboarding, a successful process, we are seeing when start with people, not just with the platform. So to make sure that the people and the site user understand the change and why this matter to them. It's a fundamental key aspect to ensure the use of technology and then the development of ROI for the use of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you start with one job site and then sort of expand across them? Is that the model, or do you start with five job sites concurrently? Like once you get a construction company hooked on a piece
But
of tech.
depends on the different type of business. What we try to focus is what we call fast time to value. So instead of focusing on project, focusing on process. So identify one or two critical workflow and process that can be embedded. So reviewing them and showing how the technology can use and try to apply to all the project. Of course, you cannot apply at once. You need to group them and go in a staggered approach. But instead of doing project by project across all different usage, focusing on easy win on key workflow that will enable the technology to be used in a much better way. And then generating momentum. So once the team is trained, understand the technology use, we can then look about additional processes where this specific technology can help. And then the team is already trained, so you just work on the change management part rather than the training.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you manage, I mean, Marco, the fact that every project's different, right? This is the biggest problem in our industry. Ultimately, everybody has their own requirements. Every client has their own requirements. If you're trying to roll a technology out centrally, it's really hard to actually meet those requirements across the board.
Yes, so one approach doesn't fit all. So one of the key requirements, the key part is understanding the requirements of the company, which are the business objectives. So how the company works, in how different business units is divided, how the current project are staffed. That is one of the key initial parts. So once we are able to understand this one, we can then go and look about the right approach for applying technology. As I mentioned, can be the first is people first, have a structured journey. So define a very good onboarding process, not just a manual and a video, making sure there's a sense of ownership, which we identify in the champions, and apply this fast time to value. But the key fundamental part is time to the business objective. So, for example, consultancies can have a business objective to reduce time because their way they can use technologies try to make more money, improve the revenue. While, for example, if we look for general contractors, the way that they can use technologies to be more efficient, to try to reduce their internal costs. So there are totally two opposite business value, and the way the technology gets used has to be tied to this specific business value.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think you also touched on a really interesting point, which is you've not just got the contractor, but you've got the structural engineer, a designer, the client. So it's not just the job site to the HQ dynamic that you're dealing with. It's also the dynamic between the multiple players, right?
Yeah.
Do you work with mainly contractors, or do you also work with engineers or designers? And how do you get them to align their digitization strategies when you're working in this sort of multi-stakeholder environment?
In terms of our way of working, so we work with general contractors, consultants, PMC, and client representative. So we currently don't work with designer as such. But yes, when you have a multi-tier stakeholder process and you have to interact with all of them, our way of working is understanding who is for us, which is the client, which is the one that is leading the initiative, and understand how the contractual relationship between all the different parties works to be able to understand how the technology can be mandated and then used across different parties. One of the key part that we look is which is the business value. And when we work sometimes with clients where they have the technology, but for example, they don't know what is their key problem, we try to go in a question-led approach. So how we can try to help you. So which is your key problem? which are your business objectives. Because as I mentioned, technology has to be tied to the business goal to be able to improve them, to be able to then deliver ROI. But even before looking at maximizing the ROI, I would get a step before. That is a cost recovery point. So purchasing a technology and then deploying as a cost in terms of cost of the technology plus cost of owning technology, the adoption, the training, the materials that you create. So there is a cost that as a business you are having. So the first level that we try to work with our clients is after how many months or weeks you have the point where you have recovered your technology costs. So from that point onwards, it becomes a net positive. So you spend X to purchase technology and X to adopt technology, but from after 3 months, you have recovered this cost, so become a net zero cost. And then let's focus on maximizing the ROI. So understanding how to tie even better with business objective, and then bringing this ROI in a 12, 24, 36 months span.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so I guess if you had to run us through the blueprint for digitizing a construction company, yeah, where do you start? I mean, it sounds like you start by identifying the problem, and then what's the systematic set of steps that kind of gets you to real ROI, and calculating that ROI as well, because I think you just touched on that. There's an element of like, what's the payback period, and when do I actually see the bottom line change fundamentally?
Yes. So the first part is understanding which are the business objectives and which technology has to be used. So sometimes clients have a specific problem that has to be solved. Sometimes is we want to digitize, so we don't know where to begin. So we tried another way to tie the technology to the key business plan. And I love to ask what I call the magic wand question. So if you had the magic wand, which is the biggest problem that you would solve immediately today? So that give us an idea on how to look and how to act with the use of technology. So then what we do, once we understand the problem and we have technology, we do a full review of that process. We cannot apply technology blindly. So we do a full process review and we digitize the process based on the new technology. Then the next step is going down with the training and adoption. So making sure that every single user is trained, starting with 2 or 3 key process, the one that can deliver the most value. They can be also the one that can be adopted the fastest, because once we start to work, the key element is building momentum. So showing the benefit of using technology, so we can then create a communication plan showing how specific projects are improving their activities because they're using technologies. So building momentum and then attract more people and be able to win this fear of change, or I don't want to change, I don't want to use new technology. Then be able to, once we understand which is the problem, get the ROI, which is the target. We can either save time, we want to deliver more quality control, we want to be able to cut our cost and deliver the same project with less workforces, or have the same teams spread around to different projects, so they have to cut the time. So once we have fully understand which are the key requirements, we are able to monitor how the adoption behave. A key example that I can do either when before I was in Vinci or now is, especially on the time saving. We were working side to side with the team, understanding how that specific task was performed before the use of technology. Then we were working with them on site, doing exactly the same task with an updated process with the use of technology. So we were able to physically understand the time saving that we had in this adoption process, and then be able then to multiply by the number of process, the number of project and user, be able then to understand if we follow this process by X amount of user, we are able to deliver, I don't know, 5,000 hours saved across the year. That this is an equivalent of X amount of cost in salaries. So as a key blueprint, that is what we normally do, starting with the problem, define the ROI, planning the adoption training to be able to work on small win and be able to then apply more and more process one after each other.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was just about to ask you, how do you actually measure the return on investment? And I think you just touched on it. It sounds like you're actually running side-by-side studies to kind of look at the impact on, say, time and motion basis to really understand how much time am I saving. I think one of the challenges that I've certainly seen, though, is it's really hard to then correlate that all the way back to like dollars saved on a project because there's so many variables that deliver
Yes.
or that determine the outcome on a profitability basis of a project that it's really difficult to actually go, hey, as a result, saving this amount of time saved this much dollars on this project. How do you sort of bridge that gap in terms of the impact on the bottom line?
Hmm. That is $1 million question. We can always see this question asked. For example, if we look about something that's related to BIM technologies, is if we do this clash detection, we could avoid these clashes, but that clashes never happen, so it's hard to quantify. Or what I mentioned before, if we save time, that can be equivalent to cost, but we are still paying the same amount of salary. We are not reducing our workforce, so our real bottom line hasn't changed. So what we try to work is you are paying a very high skill people, a project manager, a site engineer, where by statistic, for example, created by McKinsey, 30 to 35% of their time is dedicated in admin activities, so finding information rather than delivering the job on site. So even if, yes, you are not saving direct cost on paying less salary, you are having a high skill user fully dedicating on delivering the job and reducing the admin time by 30-35%. So you are basically paying a full salary or full cost per hour on high value activities rather than on admin time. So becoming more productive, be able to deliver better. So that's gonna go deliver the bottom line. So it's not a simple answer because you will never be able to just say, I saved £1 million just saving X amount of hours. But there are so many different characteristics and factors that we have to look. One of the key parts, as I mentioned, is just high value activities instead of admin time. That is one of the easiest win that we can deliver in terms of ROI, bringing technology on site.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other side of all this is, I mean, so you're driving cost savings ultimately, or productivity savings, in the backdrop of an industry where we have a shortage of like skilled resource and skilled engineers. So it's really using people's time effectively. But you've also got the opportunity to actually increase revenue in some respects, right? Because we're talking about the ROI through saving cost, but there's also winning more work or ultimately through digital technologies. Are you seeing that pan out as well?
Definitely, yes. We are seeing this one towards the CMO consultancy part rather than general contractor, where the use of technology can be used to win more work or to really have a better bottom line. Because if you make a plan on how to deliver this job, and before you needed 15 site team, you can say, now I can deliver the same job with 13 people. So the new job, I'm just going to only have 13. So I'm going to make a saving because I'm having less cost. Also, in terms of bidding and winning activities, clients always want to see a better way to be delivered. So be able to bring technologies and be able to moving away from the old way of delivering the job and being more tech oriented or deliver the job in a tech digital way always can bring an edge on how to win more work. So we are seeing this one especially in PMC, where they can use technology to save on the bottom line to generate cost saving, but also able to win more jobs.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, we've certainly seen this as well, actually, with our solution with Data Hub that I know you're familiar with. We're digitizing concrete processes on site. We're bringing all this data. We're enabling the job site teams to be more efficient and saving them time and money. But at the same time, we're actually digitizing all this information and allowing the contractors to win more work because they can demonstrate they're able to build low carbon or demonstrate they're able to increase quality on job sites. So there's sort of real tangible external benefits we've seen for the clients on top of the efficiency
Definitely.
internal piece.
But also, I think this one really tied well with the site to HQ part, because at HQ level, talking about concrete and CO2 and monitoring, there is a lot of information at HQ level you have to monitor. That before was a lot of manual work, additional manual work that on site they have to take, not to be more productive, but just to be able to provide certain information that were needed at HQ, even just for reporting level. Even if we think about the scope 1 and 2 of CO2, there are certain values that have to be reported. While using a solution, for example, like Data Hub, will enable the site team to do their own job without extra activities, enable HQ to be able to get the information they need for their day-to-day jobs. And then, as you say, reporting to the client, because it's, especially in the UK, becoming a mandatory requirement in terms of CO2 and concreting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's all these drivers externally that are really starting to drive a shift as well. And if we, I mean, you've kind of gone back to this idea of HQ getting the value versus the job site getting the value. I think what we've talked about on quantification and ROI is very much it's like an HQ level ROI, right? Because ultimately
Yeah.
the company is paying for the adoption of the technology. But if we bring it back to the human side of all of this, how do you catalyze the people on the job site to actually start adopting? We're dealing with an industry where we've had the same practices for decades, if not centuries, in some respect. I'd love to kind of dive into how you think about the human side of all of this. How do you catalyze change amongst people on job sites? Not just from a kind of a training perspective, but how do you change the culture, the mindset, the openness to technology?
That is a fundamental part. So not a single successful digital transformation program can start without starting with the people and the culture first. Because overall, in construction possibly is a much bigger problem, but it's always a problem when you try to introduce something more to have the fear of what is changing. So as I mentioned before, I define the fear of change. People don't want to change, especially in industry that is old school. The average age is much higher than other industry. It's harder to allow people to change on this technology. There is this fear. So what we try to do is instead of going from we have decided to borrow this technology as to be used, the key fundamental part is showing the value. Is this technology is being brought on site because make benefit to them. Others, as you mentioned, at HQ level, the ROI, but this one makes their day-to-day life easier and better. So a key example I can make that when I was in sector before, when I was in Vinci, is we targeted the initial, what we call digital more oriented people, mostly the more youngest ones. So the one that we could have less resistance to getting new technology. Showing them the technology, start them to use them, and compare the benefit of them using technology versus they're doing the job in an old way. So they were able to be faster, they were able to deliver a better job, and they were able to leave site, for example, on time rather than 2 hours late because they were back doing some admin time that the other site team were not needed to do. So then we start to show the other team, the one that they were more resistant, that there was a value of what we were doing. That was for their own benefit to be able to be more productive and to be able to do a better job in less time. So what we try to do is after showing the value, we try to transform this fear of a change in a request for a change. With marketing campaign, communication campaign, showing the value, working from small win, be able to generate momentum internally with communication campaign. And something that we love doing is gamification experience. So as human, we like to be able to be challenged. So what we do is try to have some gaming inside these activities. An example that we're doing this Giga project in KSA is we had the competition. Is the people that were taking the most capture and the most snags in that amount of time was 30 days were winning. I think the top one was an iPad, the second one was an Amazon voucher, and the third one was a restaurant voucher. So very small price. That was activities that they have to take anyway. So we were not adding extra tools, but we were giving an incentives as a gaming solution that enabled the people to be more interested and not seeing these activities as a burden, but something that initially they could get something from. So then the usage skyrocketed because we played with the gamification experience. There can be different way of doing it, but working with the human-centered adoption to be able to win the transformation, the change management is fundamental to enable the team to get the technology, use technology, then be able to deliver ROI.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think, you really hit the nail on the head with fear, right? It's the fear of change, the fear of adopting something new. We're dealing with an industry where the stuff we're building is like mission critical, safety critical. So there's really big consequences for things going wrong. And at the end of the day, a lot of the barrier to tech adoption is going to be just fear at sort of the psychological level. So yeah, I really love the approach here in terms of creating the space for people to actually see the value of that technology
Yeah.
uh, for themselves, right, firsthand, but then also telling stories about it. You talked about sort of internal internal storytelling or marketing? I mean, how do you actually do that in practice? How do you tell people about the successes and make sure that if you get one job site to kind of really deliver a great outcome, you can get the message out to other job sites?
Can be done in different way, but the idea is once we start to build momentum on the first delivery that we provide, and we start to understand the benefit that technology starts to providing, we wrap in small videos on banners, and this one can be shared within the internal communication channel. So, for example, it can be Slack, Teams, internal emails showing the benefit, creating small videos that can be shared with the people that delivering on site, saying how the use of technology has changed the way that they were working. So not just listening from someone else, but from their colleagues, what they were doing before and how they were doing after. Is a layer of marketing that must to be delivered as part of the change management process. So to be able to build momentum, this small win, they have to be shared. Otherwise, we will never be able to build momentum. And we love doing the small videos, internal communication banners, success story. So there are different ways that this one can be done. Also depends on how the client prefer working. But I feel that the videos and listening from the voice of your colleagues is always one of the best way to understand the change and where the benefits are coming from.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you bring it back to sort of fear and trust, like hearing it firsthand from other people who you respect and have worked with is definitely going to be the best driver there. That makes a lot of sense. And
Of
and
course.
talking of I guess the getting over that fear hurdle, if you will. One of the things we've certainly seen is actually getting people to trust the technology is a major challenge in some cases, right? You're bringing in new data points that mean you're going to start doing things differently, and you need to trust that the tool or the AI model or whatever you're using is actually telling you something that you can believe is correct or true. How do you manage that piece? How do you get people to trust that the data is correct when they're using these types of solutions?
Well, that is a great question. So I would love that that would not be a problem, but unfortunately, yes. Especially we talk about how to trust the technology, but trust the data, the output that coming out from this technology, that is another part. For example, when you mentioned AI, uh, we have seen cases where what in terms of progress tracking, so the AI technology was providing certain percentage of completion of certain trades, and the planner wasn't trusting this data, so went back to recheck those information, and after a few hours of work, came back with a very similar output. So what you want to avoid is avoiding this retrospectively redo the work, reinventing the wheel because you don't trust the data. It's a process of trust. So what we try to do is running an initial parallel work where you have data provided by AI or by technology, and then the user calculate their own output in their own standard way. So showing that the output they are getting match what the technology is giving. So start to trust the data. Because as a human being, you will always distrust something that you don't understand or something that just landed on your desk. So starting this process of running parallel exercise where we can start the trust start to be built day by day, and then be able to do spot check. So moving from a parallel exercise where you have to do always the same task and checking, moving to spot check. So instead to do every day, maybe you do once a week, making sure that the data is still on the same point, is what you think it should be. That will enable the user to trust the information. And we only see that the best way to do it is with this process of trust, using start with a parallel exercise, and then day by day be able to build the trust. After you start trusting your colleague or person that work with you, the same way you start trusting the technology, because you start to understand and see that the output that provides are very similar or identical or better, I would say, the one that you are defining by yourself. So
Yeah,
I
no,
would not see no other way than a process of trusting the data.
yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think we saw this actually in a couple places. When we first started innovating with sensors, we put sensors in concrete, and people are used to these crush tests, right? You literally see concrete getting crushed, and now you suddenly got a sensor you can't see telling you how the concrete is performing. So we definitely had to go through that iterative process where people start using it, they try it a couple of times, they compare it to other methods, and then over time that kind of trust builds up. And now you're kind of pushing it to the next level with AI models that are predicting concrete strength.
Yeah.
Well, do I trust the prediction? And again, it's a kind of question of time and comparison to sort of other methods. That's yeah, super interesting.
Of course, the part that has to be really thought for is the data output depends, the quality of data output depends of the quality of the data input. So that is the part where we try to put a lot of focus to ensure that there is a good quality, because we always hear rubbish in, rubbish out. So of course you can trust the system, but if we start to see that the quality of data in starts to be wrong, that is where we try to intervene to ensuring that the output is correct. So start to working from the origin of the problem, making sure the data input is correct and then can be trusted by the end user.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, I mean, I think if we had to summarize the blueprint, if you will, for getting ROI out of construction tech, is start with a business goal, right?
Yes.
And then tie it to kind of measurable, quantifiable metrics, whether it's like saving on people time spent on admin, or really like what's the actual saving you're looking to realize. Then, when you kind of move into adoption and onboarding, I guess I think one of the things that stuck with me from earlier was that you talked about building champions across job sites, using them to galvanize the change, and then using storytelling effectively across the organization. So, you've got this sort of thing at the top, which is the tip of the iceberg, which is adoption or buying the thing, but real adoption starts, or the real work starts when you actually kind of bought the
Yeah.
solution.
All the
And
hidden part is behind.
And then there's that people piece, right? Like really getting the people and culture and getting over that fear hump, if you will, to kind of generate trust. Is that a good summary of sort of the?
Yes, 100%. And my way of work is always people, process, technology. Technology always have to come last. So having the right understanding the people part with the change management and the culture, be able to change the process, understanding and tie with the business value to then apply the right technology. That is the way they always try to follow to make sure that we can deliver ROI on the technology that we purchase on the project.
Amazing. So I have like three more questions for you, quick ones, really, to kind
Of
of
course.
wrap this up. One mistake to avoid when choosing new construction tech. If you had to pick one.
I will go with don't focus on technology first. So focus on understanding the problem and then the business objective and then get the right technology.
Now, second question, one behavior or habit that leads to better adoption.
I will go with lead by example. So when senior leadership team actively use the technology themselves rather than just ask someone else to use it, it creates a culture where adoption becomes the norm, not the exception. So lead by example, just don't ask someone else to use it, but use it yourself.
Amazing. And then final question before we open it up to Q&A. One thing to do this quarter to improve your company's tech ROI.
Other than code sector, I will say if there is one thing I suggest is to focus on one or two critical workflow, and then double down on adoption. Because if you spread it in, ROI is get diluted. So while be able to focus on those two workflow that can have the biggest impact, can then generate real momentum.
Amazing. Thanks, Marco. I mean, this is super interesting, diving into how SEKTOR.Build and how you think about adopting technology. I think, we've got one of the world's biggest industries. It's a foundational sector, and there's just so much opportunity around the use of technology at pretty much every stage of the value chain. I mentioned earlier, $37 billion invested to date into construction tech since 2014. So a massive explosion in investment in solutions. But I think we're just, in some respects, at the tip of the iceberg of the solutions we're going to see in this sector.
Oh, definitely.
Cool. I can see we've got a couple questions here. So let's open this up to Q&A. First question that we've got is, what have you found are really effective ways to get buy-in and galvanize champions?
So if we talk champions on site, I will see that understanding that what the technology can deliver is helping themselves, but also is trying to make the success of the technology tied to the success of the user. So it's technology adoption and the use of the technology successful in the specific project that are rewards and recognition to a specific user. So that is what we try to find that always works the best. So aligning the technology objective or the business objective to the objective of the user and the champions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess that's interesting. I mean, I'll actually skip to the next question and come back to the other one, because we have a question around sort of, do younger, more tech native people make better champions, or more senior members who have more clout? And that ties straight into this question around champions. What do you find in practice, Marco? And yeah, how does that tie into making them effective champions in the organization?
That is a very great question. I don't think there is an answer that will fit at all different organizations. We can see case where the younger user are better fit to drive the new technology just because they understand better, they need less training, and they'll be able to work in a more faster way. But at the same time, senior members, they need, as I mentioned before, one of the behavior to change is lead by example. If you have a senior member of your team that asks to use a technology but never use it, so ask to use specific technology to raise an RFI, but then go back and write an email to release an RFI, that is where bring the ISO technology backwards, so a couple of steps back. So I feel that my suggestion is a mix between a younger and senior management together to become champions. That will give the balance of seniority and better understanding of technology, better recipe of technology because they understand it better.
Awesome. Thanks, Marco. And then we've got another question on the iceberg analogy that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Can you share an example when a project failed and what was the main reason?
One of the most common reasons why the project failed in terms of technology is we said the technology doesn't deliver what it promised. One of the key part is all of us have a way of working. All of company are standard operating procedure, and we have to deliver work in a certain way. If you bring the technology without understanding how this one fit within the SOP, they could not fit within the technology. There can be certain tasks that maybe the technology does in a different way, where we do in a way that we always done, the technology is not able to adapt. So a way of seeing not working is not adapting the process where technology got bought and the senior team or the site team told us the technology doesn't really work or they don't do what has been promised because we use a submittal process to be done in this way, and then we have to change it to make it work with the technology. That could be even a better way using technology. So that is where we see failing because we try to force our way of working within the use of the new technology.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd agree with that. I think what I've seen implementations fail, it's always because of a mismatch between the initial business goal or sort of the HQ level desire to adopt something and the job site and the constraints of their day-to-day. And actually tackling kind of the need of the users is just so important at the level of the job site to make it work.
And if I can make an example on our day-to-day life, all of us use technology. And always I make an analogy that when we work in a construction site, it's like we forgot that we are in 2025, we go back in 1920, we don't use technology. It's our technology in our hand is even more powerful than the computer that put human to the moon. But all of us, we were sending letters, now we send emails. So we are trying to do the same delivery, so sending information to someone, but we updated our process in the way of doing. We don't do writing by hand, we write on our laptop and we click send. So it's an example where we had to adapt our way of doing something based on the technology that now we have at hand. And something similar as an analogy can be applied on site. If we don't adapt, the technology will not fail because we could have said our phone doesn't send a letter as the postman would do.
Yeah, I love that analogy, Marco. That's really nice to think about it. And you know, comparatively, if you think about sort of how long we've been doing construction, which is millennia or as long as humanity's existed, compared to how long we've had technology. I mean, the smartphone only started being a thing, what, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
So there's just like this massive shift that's kind of still ahead of us. And it's really exciting to kind of see where it's all coming and where it's all going. Cool. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Marco, thank you so much for sharing your insights. That was really exciting. And I think there's a lot of really bright avenues in the future to drive real impact in this sector of tech. Thank you to everybody who's participated in the webinar. We hope you found the session valuable and watch out for the recording. Feel free to share it with anybody who would find it interesting. And if you do have a moment to share feedback on the questionnaire that's pinned in the Zoom, that would be great. And yeah, thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, Raf. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for your invite. Thank you.